What's the news from the other parts of Tamriel?
Nothing I'd like to talk about.
I'll preface this retrospective with an observation so bafflingly obvious, the mere fact that there actually exist human beings with hollow enough cranial cavities to actually question its legitimacy stands testament to the fact that natural selection is an imperfect theory. That statement is the following. Elder Scrolls is an RPG series, not a first-person shooter, not a sandbox game, not, as some shrieking Nihongophilic guano-brained fucking dolts have suggested, an adventure game. Why? Because role-playing games begin and end with Dungeons and Dragons.
Survival depends on a quick, decisive move. Your choices are limited. Stand and fight, or run. Use your lightning bolt. Victory is yours.
Win the treasure!
TSR Hobbies, Dungeons and Dragons games. Products of your imagination.
And with that readily discernible granule of truism thus regurgitated, I'll further note that of all the available role-playing games on the market, the first several Elder Scrolls games best represent the core pillars of the D&D experience. Let me ask you something.
You ever seen a grown man naked?
When first allowing your bulbous ass to be swallowed by the Miller Lite beanbag in your mother's basement in order to imbibe in the pungent aroma of a D&D gathering, what is the very first thing one does? You fill out your character sheet and you roll dice to determine your character's attributes. What is the first thing one does upon booting up Arena? Fill out your character sheet and roll for your character's attributes. When engaged in combat, each strike is even calculated by invisible dice rolls in the same way one rolls dice during combat in D&D. JRPG filleting ideologues the world over try deep-throating that pulsating cylindrical flesh rod of factuality. Not only is Elder Scrolls an RPG, it's arguably the purest example of an RPG in the market today. Though ostensibly rough around the edges, the Elder Scrolls Arena was and is a milestone of the role-playing genre, pioneering the concept of a living, breathing, three-dimensional open role-playing world almost a full decade before Grand Theft Auto 3 was erroneously credited with inventing the sandbox game. Though drawing palpable inspiration from the dungeon crawling of Looking Glass Studios' role-playing masterpiece Ultima Underworld, in the immortal words of C.S. Lewis, it came like a bolt of lightning from a clear blue sky. Asking if Arena is difficult is like asking if putting your nuts in a vice tickles. This game will pummel your ass so hard you will legally change your name to Lance Bass. But frankly, even if you dispense with all that expository pomp, you'll still be left with one of the finest role-playing games ever made for the home computer. Its only weakness, aside from the fact that you can't swing a dead cat without hitting one of the series' patented hilarious glitches, is that as superb as the game is, its sequel improved upon it in every conceivable way. 4 rats that sound like squeaky shopping cart wheels out of 5. While Arena's metamorphosis from a multiplayer arena combat game into an RPG was almost accidental, the sequel's aspirations were clear from day one, to be the most corpulent, unfettered open-world RPG experience ever made, and with a game world that literally spans the size of Great Britain, Daggerfall makes Gabe Newell look anorexic. For those of you who have played Oblivion or Morrowind and been blown away by their sheer amplitude and non-Euclidean mission structure, but have yet to revel in the majesty of Arena and Daggerfall, you really haven't beheld the true Elder Scrolls experience yet. Morrowind and Oblivion, while exceptional games in their own right, are essentially 1/100th of the game that Daggerfall was, in sheer volumetric terms if nothing else. In Oblivion, for example, there are 5 major factions to join. In Daggerfall, when you ask an NPC about the game's factions, the number of entries can't even be contained on a single page. You'd think with the advancement of media storage size, technology, and graphics that the newer games would be bigger, but the size of each subsequent game seems to be disintegrating in slow motion. Don't believe me? Check this shit out.
The game has over 200 dungeons, all handcrafted. And it's one of our over 150 handcrafted dungeons in the game.
If the platitude dispenser attached to Todd Howard's face keeps this shit up, Elder Scrolls 8 will take place entirely inside of a 5x5 log cabin, but fuck if it won't be the most open-ended and graphically impressive log cabin in existence. Case in point, in Oblivion you can own a horse, or house. In Daggerfall, you can own a horse, a cart to go with said horse, multiple houses, or one of several models of your own honest-to-God fucking pirate ship. And you can use each of these things to store your inventory. In Oblivion, you can turn into a vampire. In Daggerfall, you can turn into a vampire, a werewolf, or a wereboar. And yes, that is every bit as terminally badass as it sounds. Am I biased on the subject of Daggerfall? Is iCarly's fanbase comprised of balding middle-aged deviants with an abiding affection for trench coats and windowless vans? The best game in the series, and without question, my favorite RPG of all time. 5 out of 5. If there's such a thing as glitchy perfection, then Daggerfall invented it. It's commonly believed that Morrowind was the third game in the series, but this is actually an apocryphal attribution, as 1997 saw the two-fisted release of simultaneous spin-offs within less than a month of each other. If you think Ubisoft pinched the last several Assassin's Creed games out of the birth canal prematurely, bite the pillow and declench your sphincter in anticipation of Redguard and Battlespire, two wildly different games, one a competent 3D adventure game, and the other a multiplayer quasi-RPG dungeon crawler not at all dissimilar in philosophy to the eternally overrated Demon's Souls. Redguard is what happens when Prince of Persia isn't playtested. The story, as one might expect with an Elder Scrolls game, is the lone bright spot in what is an otherwise incredibly mediocre effort. But hey, Bethesda apparently liked Cyrus's voice actor so much they brought him back to be the voice of every single black person in Oblivion. It's not a bad game, but it's not exceptional either. The dictionary definition of 2.5 out of 5. Battlespire, however, is another story. Bethesda should be legally compelled to melt down the plastic used to manufacture discs of this game in an effort to ensure the atoms contained therein will one day be put to a task deemed even marginally meritorious. Even if it gets molded into a double donger for a desperate Midwestern housewife, at least there's a chance it may someday bring someone actual pleasure. Battlespire is what happens when Elder Scrolls fucks Quake, or rather, Quake fucks Elder Scrolls, as there is no chance in blue hell that Bethesda was the pitcher in this lurid scenario. It's multiplayer, it's glitchy, it's barely as functional, it's 1 out of 5. Avoid at all fucking costs. Bethesda took their sweet-ass time cranking out a new proper entry in the Elder Scrolls series, a full half-decade in fact, but when the first screenshots of Morrowind at last leaked to the press, it was abundantly clear it would be worth the wait. Of course, we wouldn't know until we actually played the fucking thing that certain features endemic to the core design of Daggerfall had been arbitrarily removed entirely, fast travel being the most obvious and irritating example of said phenomenon. Yes, uninformed Oblivion haters, fast travel was not a casualized modern addition to the series, it was a feature that had been removed and was at last restored to the heaving bosom of the Elder Scrolls experience with Oblivion. In other news, trees cast shade and grass is known to be green of pigment. All that in sports at 11. Taking place in the Dark Elf homeland of Morrowind, specifically the island of Vardenfell, the game was a darker, slower, more atmospheric experience than Daggerfall had been. Instead of stumbling drunkenly through randomly generated dungeons, the locales became more varied, from watery sewer passages to dwarven ruins with names that have more improbably placed consonants in the Ubangi phone book. But compromises had to be made in order to facilitate the game's graphics, which even on the original Xbox are still resplendent by today's standard, with one self-evident exception. I've made origami with more polygons than the average Morrowind character model. Even with texture mods, the characters have such low poly counts it's almost impossible to make them look human. I'm fairly certain my forehead doesn't have a sternum, Bethesda. What in the actual fuck were you thinking? Morrowind was the bold step forward that led to the current commercial and critical dominance of Bethesda as we know it. It's far from perfect and inferior in some ways to both its predecessor and its successor, but it's an incredible game that every role-playing fan needs to play at least once. 4 out of 5. By the release of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion in 2006, the once niche RPG series had experienced a Kafka-esque metamorphosis into a commercial powerhouse. Early trailers and E3 tech demos met with industry-wide acclaim and anticipation, which, as a longtime fan of the series, was actually a great thing to see. A truly exceptional Western RPG developer was finally getting its due. Lamentably, the watchword for Oblivion's development cycle was streamlined. Instead of long blade, medium blade, and short blade comprising 3 separate skills, they'd been condensed to the absurd blade skill, because after all, wielding a bastard sword is identical to fending off a salivating throng of orcs with a butter knife. Look, I like Oblivion a lot. Generally speaking, I feel it's an improvement over Morrowind, but some of the omissions in the game strike me as downright fucking retarded. On what planet can a Nord character not have a beard? Did the entire nation of Cyrodiil have mandatory laser follicle surgery? How fucking metrosexual is the land of Tamriel exactly? And why, after the first two games had vampires and werewolves, would this game only have vampires? And why does becoming a vampire turn your character into Willem Dafoe? Sadly, Skyrim seems hell-bent on continuing this lugubrious trend, so now the level-up screen will have more perks than Scott Hall's fanny pack, but that's a vitriolic rant for another day. As it stands, Oblivion gets a near-perfect 4.5 out of 5. I'll say in conclusion that while much of what I'm seeing from the 5th Elder Scrolls game looks like dumbification in the lowest order, I'm still very hopeful for the future of the series. Even if Skyrim's release takes a diuretic dump all over the franchise by trying to walk the well-worn path of games like Dragon Age 2 and Final Fantasy 13, oh well! We've still got 4 excellent games and 2 spin-offs nobody knows exist to keep us busy while Bethesda struggles against its own identity crisis. Elder Scrolls doesn't need a glowy trail spell to hold your hand and take you to the next fucking location. That's what the map system is for. Elder Scrolls doesn't need to combine the armor to a single goddamn piece. If there are gamers of such staggeringly facile intellect they can't wrap their minds around the difference between greaves and a breastplate, then the government needs to neuter these special Olympians before they decide to procreate. But with the game's release only a short while away, I suppose like all gamers, all I can do is close my eyes, chomp on the pillow, and pray to my upright walking God that Bethesda hasn't been hitting the sauce with nearly as much regularity as that shrieking talentless boob David Jaffe has been hitting Jade Raymond. I'm RazörFist God. Fucking speed.
Good day.
Enough talk.
It's you. Hi.
I understand the Fighters Guild is hiring new members. Not bad work for some
It
folks.
seems Somerset
So
Island
I've
has
heard.
become a much more
Go
dangerous
away,
place.
fool.